Okay, it is Monday, April 13th, 2015, 7 p.m. at Gladstone City Hall. We're going to call this regular meeting of the Gladstone City Commission to order. The first item on our agenda is invocation. If you'd all rise, the invocation will be led by Commissioner Gay.
Let us pray. Heavenly Father, we come to you this evening thankful for this wonderful season of rebirth that we call spring. Lord, we ask that you give us wisdom and patience as we meet together this evening to work on charting a course forward for our city with our fellow residents. Father, we thank you for the opportunity to do this as a result of being an American. We ask for patience in your wisdom. In Jesus' name, amen.
Amen. Pledge allegiance
to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Will the city clerk please call the roll?
Commissioner Bostic?
Here.
Commissioner Gay?
Here.
Commissioner Beckman?
Here.
Commissioner Nemechek?
Here.
Mayor Mackey?
Is here. Next item on our agenda is public comment. I'm going to lead off with two items that are in front of the City Commission tonight. First is a proclamation for Head Start Month, May of 2015, which I'm going to read. I've already signed it, so nobody will have a problem with that. Whereas Head Start has been a high-quality, comprehensive early childhood education, health, and social services program operating locally since the mid-1960s, and whereas Head Start emphasizes individualized services and the involvement and leadership of parents in setting goals designed to maximize the successful development of school readiness attributes in each child, whereas Head Start has earned an outstanding reputation as the most successful program that responds to educational and social challenges, and has proven effective in reducing future grade retention, delinquency, school dropout, unemployment, and criminal activity. And whereas Head Start provides GED and literacy tutoring and other services to support the self-sufficiency efforts of low-income families, and whereas Head Start provides parents with a wealth of information on child development, child guidance strategies, and the importance of establishing and maintaining positive parent-child relationships. And whereas Head Start is comprised of hundreds of young children and loving families, dedicated staff, outstanding community partners and volunteers, and whereas the Head Start program, a positive environment where goals are identified and progress is recognized, has had a positive effect on the community through the positive impact on young children and their families. Now therefore we, the Gladstone City Commission, do hereby proclaim May 2015 as Head Start Month and urge all citizens of the city of Gladstone to support and reflect on the outstanding results of Head Start. So, that proclamation has been read into the record, and I've signed the proclamation. So, May 2015 is Head Start Month in the city of Gladstone. The next item, that is called Tier 2, Notification of City of Gladstone Drinking Water, which Mr. Buckman, our Water and Wastewater Supervisor, is going to address us on.
Unfortunately, we had a Tier 2 disinfectant byproduct maximum contaminant violation in the last quarter. This includes sampling from the second quarter of 2014 through the first quarter of 2015. In the 1980s, they passed a law making a limit on trihalomethanes. At that time, it was 100 parts per million. Per billion, I mean. Since that time, they've lowered it to 80, and they've also cut down the number of samples that we take. We used to average our 4 samples, which would be average of 16. Now we take an average of 4. So if we get one spike, like we did get last December, it really makes it hard to meet the limits. Anyway, I have to publicize this notice, and this will be in the newspaper. It'll also be in everybody's bills. The two big statements that come right from EPA are, what should I do? You do not need to use an alternate bottled water supply. However, if you have specific health concerns, you may want to consult your doctor. What does this mean? This is not an immediate risk. If it had been a Tier 1 violation, you would have been notified immediately. However, some people who drink water containing trihalomethanes in excess of the MCL over many years may have an increased risk of getting cancer. So why did this happen at this time? Well, unfortunately, last fall, we got the lake levels from last year, and the precipitation came up in a historic 22 inches in 1 year. And because our intake is actually not in Little Beatty Knock, it's in Little Beatty Knock, but it's the estuary of 5 rivers, we get a lot of the color that comes down with that, and that color combined with chlorine, which we add to kill the bacteria, sometimes can create bad organisms. And so the big problem was we experienced, and if there are any ice fishermen here, they can tell you that our water last December, January, and February, and most of March, our color was over 40 color units, which usually it's around 20 color units. We were taking coffee in for pretty much the whole winter. The reason for that was the high runoff, and we had early ice sheet, so we didn't get the natural cleansing of a lake turnover in the fall. So this might sound like excuses, but it's not. We're addressing this. We are currently looking at alternatives, pre-oxidation chemicals. Instead of using chlorine, we're looking at using a couple different chemicals. One of them is calcium permanganate, which will oxidize a lot of the stuff found in color, the humic and fulvic acids, which are the culprit for creating these compounds, and they'll settle out in our clarifiers. We're also looking at possibility of adding granular activated carbons to our filter and mixing in our ground storage tank and the 1,000,000-gallon reservoir up on the bluff. That's about all I can think of right now. This whole document will be on our website, and it'll be in the newspaper, and it'll be in the bill. So if anyone has any questions, they can call the water plant. All the addresses and our website are on here right now. Any questions?
What did it last test at? And
It
when
wa-
was the last test?
The
reading?
last sample, we were below 80. We were 71 and 69. So the last samples were below the limit, which were.
Because of that, are you testing it more often?
We have to test it quarterly, and when we start our new feeding the calcium permanganate, we will test it more often. We can tell what's going to happen by what the total organic carbon content is in the raw water coming in, and what if the color is up. If the color is over 20, we have a hard time meeting the requirement. So.
Okay. Thank you.
There are no questions from the audience at this point in time. You can have public comment when Mr. Buckman is done, and we can address any questions to the water
Are you
department.
talking to me?
No, I'm talking to the gentleman behind you.
I just had a question, but that's
Okay. We'll get to you. Is there any other questions from the commission? Would you, from what I'm hearing you saying, this is a precaution?
Yeah, it's precaution. We used to take a lot more samples, and it was the average of the whole distribution system. Now, 3 or 4 years ago, we had to go through and do a complete distribution study into different parts of town, and then we had come out with places where we might get spikes, and those were the 2 places. We have the trihalomethanes, and we also have the haloacidic acids, which we have no problem with the haloacidic acids. It's the trihalomethanes that we could have problems with, but it all depends on what the color is in the wintertime. We were really a hard egg for the EPA to understand, because historically everybody has a spike in their trihalomethanes, all the water plants around the U.S., and it's usually in July or August. Well, ours is always in December or January, because that's when we get our colored water. So.
And if there's any questions from the public, you'd welcome phone calls at the water plant?
Yes, and the water's perfectly safe to drink. I drink my 3 Spartan mugs of water every day, and by the time we get done we're doing let's see what's the paperwork involved here. That we are in the middle of an operational evaluation report for the EPA, and so we'll be going over every stage of the treatment and in modifying it so that we can correct this problem. I called the DEQ back in December, and I told them what was going on with our water, but I said, if it stays like this, we're going to have a hard time meeting this requirement. But since Milwaukee, you don't just go in and switch coagulants, you don't just go in and change your disinfectants, because that's what happened in Milwaukee when they had the big cryptosporidium outbreak 15 or so years. So now you have to go through and you have to move at a slower pace and make sure, okay, we're dropping the trihalomethanes, but we want to make sure we're keeping the disinfectants in there so we're killing all the bad things that can also harm you. So we're playing a balance with the two is what it comes out to. So.
Okay. Thank you.
Mhm.
All right, now we're going to go to public comment. I'd remind everybody during public comment, there's no give and take between the commission and the public. If there are questions or concerns that you want the city to address them to myself, and we will get staff to make a report either tonight, if it's available, or at the next commission meeting if there's a question on something they have to do some research on. So if there's any public comments, now would be the time to take the podium.
Is this the time for me?
Yes, yes.
Okay. I sent an email to all the commissioners, and the only one that I heard from was Mr. Matanen saying that he had gotten my comments. And my name is Jean Jondro. I live at 312 Minneapolis Avenue. And I'll read you the letter that I wrote. It has come to my attention that the City Commission wants to sell some of our park areas for residential building. The 2 park areas I am concerned about are the baseball park behind the yacht club and the designated park area on Minneapolis where the boardwalk is located. The baseball field is used for many different activities, such as t-ball, baseball practice for the youth just starting baseball, football practice, and I noticed that they have a couple of hoops down there for the kids to shoot basketball. 4th of July activities, the duck races, to mention a few. We live on Minneapolis Avenue across from the boardwalk and can vouch for its continuous use by many people. The boardwalk is used by walkers, dog walkers, runners, people on bicycles, people sitting on the benches enjoying the view of the lake. The main section of the park attracts kite flyers, fathers throwing footballs for their sons to catch or batting practice, families eating lunch at the picnic tables, and watching fireworks on July 4th.
Thank you.
Any comments?
Well, we don't have public comment give and take at this point during the meeting, but every commissioner has received that email,
Okay.
okay?
So how can I find out what you're going to do about this?
Pay attention to city commission meetings. This will probably be a future city commission agenda item under discussion.
So you're not addressing it tonight?
No.
No.
Thank you. Any other public comment?
Well, my
Yeah.
comment was
You've said-
similar, so.
You have to take the podium, please, ma'am.
Okay, I didn't want to waste your time with the.
You're not wasting our time. We're here for you.
Hi, my name is Cheryl Swanson. I live at 505 South 4th Street, and I understand the city's attempting to generate more tax revenue by selling various property. And I was wondering if there were any properties for sale which would have less impact on the public as far as those using the boardwalk, lake access for fishing, general enjoyment of the shoreline. It has come to my attention that the ski park and ball diamond by the Yacht Harbor are under consideration for elimination with future ball field expansion at the sports park. My understanding is that engineering studies were done when lights were to be installed at the ballpark, and because of the high water table and the land being created by fill, the engineering study was deemed, the land was deemed as extremely unstable. Therefore, what kind of development would be suitable for that property? How would that impact the use of the ball field all summer long? And what would happen to the 4th of July activities? And what would happen to the properties if the lake level should rise? Another question that I had was if the condos were going to be put up by the boardwalk, what about the increased traffic on a narrow, less developed street by the boardwalk? Why not develop the property at the other end of the park by the highway where it would not have such a detrimental impact on our recreation area? If I understand the bike path is going to be put in that area, and maybe it would be kind of more in keeping to have that area developed instead of destroying the ball diamond and walking area that everyone has invested so much time and money to create. Gladstone's Lakeshore is a big part of its identity, and if you start picking it apart, we're wondering what'll be left. I don't know if you know how many people per day use the boardwalk and enjoy the shoreline. And it would seem that you'd have to kind of know that before you make any decisions, before you know how big an impact this would have on the community. That land and the boardwalk and so forth was funded by tax dollars, and I think the taxpayers should have a real impact on what's to be done with that. I don't live on the lake shore. I live just in the vicinity there, and there are many days when there is a significant odor from the waste plant, and I can anticipate complaints from potential condo owners living in that area. My understanding is that that particular property is currently zoned as R2, and I was wondering what protections there are if someone decides to put a trailer park in that area, because it was my understanding that R2 would allow that kind of use for that type of property. And the other question I had about that property is if it was ever designated as any type of wetland, because it's pretty wet and marshy over there. Hopefully these issues aren't cut and dried, and that the public will have fair notice and ample opportunity for input before you make any final decisions on this. I feel it's a real concern because there's no do-over if that land gets put up for grabs and you decide that it's a bad choice of the use of that property. Thank you.
So I'd give you the same advice as Mrs. Jandro. Stay tuned and please come to our meetings. We like to have people at our meetings. Commissioner
So
Gay,
when do you decide if?
at a
you
public
have
meeting.
Private meeting that you decide?
No.
What you're gonna do?
Please don't say that. We don't do that. Everything will be done at a public meeting, but it won't be decided tonight, but there's more to come. So please pay attention and please feel free to give me a call. Okay? You got my number. You know where I live.
Yeah, I got you, yeah.
Is
Know your name.
Right.
it monthly that you would be deciding this, or?
We meet twice a month.
Twice a month?
But you feel free to call me as well. I don't know your name. I know Mr. and Mrs. Jandro since forever, but, so. And any other commissioner is always available to speak as well. But that is a project that will be coming up. Any other public comment? This gentleman.
I'm Mike Bruner, and I live at 1223 Wisconsin Avenue. I want to address the same concerns these other people had. In my opinion, that lakeshore is priceless. It really is. And if we start to let a little bit of it go for this or that, we're setting a precedent. The city, like every city, is always going to be hard up for money. And so, if we're going to do this once, it's awfully easy then when we need more money to do it again. And I would just hate to see that start. My daughter lives down in Atlanta, Georgia. She comes up here. She says, "Dad, you have no idea what you got here. You just don't." And that that property isn't losing value, that's for sure. That's Gladstone. That's really our identity, if you will. So I guess, and I had this in form of questions, and while I'm not going to ask you to answer them now, I guess then I would like you to look into them a little bit so they could be addressed at a future meeting.
Can you take your questions, by the way, when you're done reading them and file them with the city clerk, please?
Sure. Okay,
So
I
we've
can
got
do
them
that.
on public record?
Yeah. For one, I was wondering how much, beyond the sale of the property that you're anticipating to sell, how much revenue would you anticipate getting in the form of taxes? Because that's really, I think, what you're trying to do in the long run is increase your tax revenues. And so how much are you going to do, let's say, per condo or whatever? I can understand over there where there's nobody using that land, that I can see it would be very reasonable to do something over there. But as far as where the public uses this so much, there I would say I would like to know, how much do you expect to generate in form of taxes from condos, say, by the waste treatment plant and also by the Ball Diamond? Because to me, unless you know that, it's pretty hard to determine. In other words, if I don't know what that's going to do for me, how can I make a decision whether or not I want to let that go for condos? That's just something that would just make sense to me. We've got to do our homework there. I don't know if you know how many building permits were issued in the last year for new homes in Gladstone? None. And so we want to have people buying condos and nobody's interested in building a home here. So that's just something, I think we got to keep that all in perspective. The other thing is we need to look at our other options. And I'm not saying you haven't, and I'm not sure just what other options are available, but I would like to see you spread the additional revenue that you would generate from these condos. I would like to see that spread over the entire taxable population instead. Then everybody has a part in carrying this burden, and it doesn't just impact those that use that area. And so I'd like to know, I guess, how much additional taxes everyone would have to pay to cover the amount of revenue that you anticipate these condos is generating, okay? And let's see here. I guess all I'd like to say besides that is, as you know, if this doesn't turn out well, if we're not real happy, maybe we made the wrong decision, it's too late. We can't, once it's gone, and that's that. There's no turning around, and that to me would be something we really have to think seriously about, okay? One other thing is, I guess, and maybe I don't know the right channels to keep in touch with or what, but we really haven't heard anything about this. You know, it seems, I understand there's been monies appropriated to look into the feasibility of this and all this, and yet it seems like this isn't being made very public. You know, when there's something positive coming up, for example, when Bell's Brewery was coming into Escanaba, we heard about it every 2 weeks. This, we haven't really heard about it except, you know, through the grapevine, you might say, and I'm wondering if that is the way we want to do this, okay? And also, we were to the Planning Commission meeting the other night. They didn't seem to know really anything much about this. And so I'm just kind of wondering if there couldn't be a little more public awareness being made of this. But again, I want to say this is Gladstone's identity, and I don't think we want to lose it. We want to look at all our options, and to me, getting rid of this Lakeshore, that's our trump card. You don't play your trump card until you've exhausted all your other options. So that's about it. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Any other public comment? Seeing none, we'll move to consent agenda. Tonight on a consent agenda, the City Commission has the City Commission regular meeting minutes of March 30th, 2015 in front of us, the Parks and Recreation Board regular meeting minutes of March 3, 2015. We have the EDC regular meeting minutes of March 10, 2015, and we have payment of bills. And there is a correction to the City Commission minutes, which was presented.
I put a your desk. It should say Commissioner Mattinen. And then on the third page, it also should say Commissioner Mattinen as well. So those are the draft ones. If you approve it with the corrections, those are what will be on file.
I move approval.
Support. Moved by Commissioner Mattinen, supported by Commissioner Gay to approve the consent agenda as presented to the City Commission tonight. All those in favor of that motion signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, that motion is carried. We have no public hearings, so we'll move through that. We have no unfinished business. So we're up to new business, and the first item on new business is a Gus Macker special event. Ms. Sarah Cole.
Yeah, actually, we need to amend.
Oh, I'm sorry, just give me one moment, please.
fine.
I'm going to ask the commission to amend the agenda to add an item that Commissioner Mattinen had talked about at our last meeting about proposal 1 and a possible, that's the statewide ballot proposal for safer roads. We've been hearing a lot about on TV. You can't hardly turn your TV on without seeing it. And we've been asked to consider a resolution, so could we add that to our agenda tonight?
So moved under item M.
Support.
Moved by Commissioner Gay, supported by Commissioner Nemechek to add item M, which was not on our original printed agenda, which is resolution on proposal 1 for safer roads. All those in favor of that motion signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, that motion is carried. Now we'll go to Sarah Cole. I'm sorry.
Did anybody need a copy of, I think you guys probably all have them in your packets? No? My name is Sarah Cole. I'm the director for our Convention and Visitors Bureau for Delta County. And I am just here as a follow-up to see what the commission has approved and to once again reiterate that the Gus Macker will be here June 13th and 14th. And we consider this a large community-wide event. We expect about 200 teams. Gus Macker is telling us we could have upwards of 250, which brings in, according to their calculations, several thousand people to downtown Gladstone. I went ahead and met with all of our businesses prior to selecting Gladstone for the event before we had approval. And overwhelming response is absolutely yes, bring this to our community. We received $10,000 from the DDA here in Gladstone, and I've raised over $5,000 from other businesses as well. So we're doing pretty well on the money that we're bringing in to support the Gus Macker. It's a huge endeavor. I think our budget is set right around $40,000. So it's expensive to host. But we kind of make our money from bringing people into the area. We expect to have a lot of people from outside of just the UP as well. Oh, sorry. We expect to have people from outside of the UP. We expect to have northern Wisconsin people here and as far as Traverse City. I'll actually be making a trip to the Gus Macker that will take place May 2nd, I believe, at Central Michigan University and do some recruiting there as well. So we're really excited to have it here. We're excited to work with the DDA in the city of Gladstone. But in doing so, we put together a list of things that we were requesting from the city, which was in the back page of the packet. So I was just here to follow up with that and see what was approved.
I believe the city commission directed the city manager to address those concerns
Yep.
of your staff, and so I'll turn it over to the city manager.
Okay.
Yeah, so, met with my staff, and we can accommodate pretty much everything on the list. There's just a few things that, for example, the bleachers, we only have 2 small sets down at the Ball Diamonds downtown. We can move those down anywhere downtown we want them. So it looks like we're gonna need to find a few more sets of bleachers. As far as dumpsters, we have very few dumpsters like in our parks, strategically placed through the city. Everybody else uses the 65-gallon, 95-gallon cans. Maybe we could use them. I'm not sure what what they're used for, but we can work with you on that one. Walkie-talkies, we don't have walkie-talkies. Even our city radios, we're kind of going away from them, and pretty much everybody has a cell phone these
Right.
days, so.
And we may be able to work with Gus Macker. These are just their requirements that they put on us and said we need to find, so.
So you gotta fill in the blanks when you
We
communicate
do.
back with them.
Yep, we
Yeah.
do. We go back and forth.
Everything else we can honor.
Okay. And this gives you enough heads up and everything, on
Yeah.
everything in here. The only other thing is the street closures, and I know that we have an approval, temporary approval to close the streets. Like I said, I went up and down Delta and 10th, and we've talked to everybody now. So everybody is okay with us closing the street in front of their business, we just need the final approval from you. And then we will have to work with you and decide if we end up with more than 200 teams. The 16 courts that we have are set for 200 teams. If we end up with 250 or more teams, we're not allowed to cap it. So we'll have to figure out where we can expand from there. And I've been working directly with your power department and Amber to figure out how we're gonna get this wired, because we do need power for vendors. That's gonna be really hard for us to not offer that to them. So we'll
Okay.
work with them and figure out how we can make that happen.
Perfect.
So are we asking the commission to take any action on parking tonight, or street closures rather?
That's part of the packet, isn't it, Sarah? So,
Parking in, other than the fairgrounds, there was no other site that could accommodate the parking that's gonna take place for this.
I was getting at street closures. You indicated you needed some action by the commission to authorize
Yeah.
streets being closed.
And that's 10th and Delta. And it's 10th down towards the bank, and Delta from the light, which is 9th, there's a map in here. And that's subject to change though. So if we can get the approval for this now, and then if we have to come back and expand.
I think it's appropriate then we get a motion tonight.
This is a special event permit application. They're asking for approval.
correct. Yep.
Okay.
It's gone through all my departments.
Okay. And no problem with public safety? No problem from public
No,
safety? or anything?
they're aware, they're gonna need to secure more, security. Yeah.
We've actually paid for, we'll pay for security. We've hired an outside security team to come in and spend the night.
I'd move that we approve the Gladstone Gus Macker special event application for June 13th through 14th this summer.
I support it. Moved by Commissioner Mattin, supported by Commissioner Bostwick to approve the special event application for the Gus Macker this June in Gladstone. All those in favor of that motion signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, that motion is carried. If you need anything further, I'm sure you are well aware that we work in the city manager's office and
Absolutely.
we will address it. The DDA is paying for most of this through their budget. They were very enthusiastic about getting this event downtown, so look forward to a good time. Thank you. Next item on our agenda tonight is the Masonic Lodge is requesting to host the Thomas Vitsky Children's Fishing Derby Saturday, January 13th, 2015, beginning at 8 in the morning till 6 p.m. in Van Cleve Park. All staff have reviewed the event and have no problems with this event for this year or the years prior. So the staff is recommending we approve this event, which is another special event permit application.
Yeah, the only thing that was, on page 2, support requested, we don't have a portable stage. So I think
Yet.
well,
Mr.
Yet,
Buckman and
yeah.
Mr. Lindahl might be working on that.
so we just wanted to bring it to their attention. You know, I'm not sure what they need it for down at the harbor, so maybe we can use something else. What's that?
The fairgrounds has a portable stage.
Okay, but they would secure that. They just provide us a list. Can you provide us with this? We can provide them with everything, but we don't have the portable stage. So we'll let them know that, and if ours is ready by then, absolutely they can use it, but
One of the reasons why I indicated we're possibly the Gladstone Lions Club, and I'm a member, and so is this guy, and so is this guy, building our own, is because we're not able to lay our hands on the fairgrounds one this year on the 4th of July in Gladstone, so we're thinking we're gonna build our own. And we won't need them anymore.
We might have bleachers too.
yeah. The CVB works with the chamber or the Commerce Center for that kind of stuff.
So, do we have a motion, or any well, we need to get a motion before we have discussion.
I would like to move approval for the
Support.
Thomas Vitsky Children's Fishing Derby.
Moved by Commissioner Nemchek, supported by Commissioner Gay to approve the Masonic Lodge Kids Fishing Tournament. Any further conversation?
It is the same day as Gus Macker, so.
Yeah,
They've
you
got,
know,
I've
it's in a
been,
different part of town.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yep.
And it's
Good.
unbelievable how many kids fish.
I've been involved with this for the last 5 or 6 years. It's a really neat thing. It's just packed.
It's unbelievable.
I was just looking at the support requested, though. I mean, are we providing, there's life jackets for children to wear? Is that stuff that we are providing, or we have?
We have life jackets down at the beach house, so
Okay.
whatever we have, they are welcome to use.
In the canopy tents? Do we have?
Yep.
Okay.
What we use down here for the farmer's market.
Oh, okay.
Yep.
All right.
All those in favor of that motion signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, that motion is carried. Next item on our agenda is something we've been talking a lot about, for the public, who may not be aware of this. One of the two city retirement plans, that being the defined benefit plan, is costing a lot more, taking a lot more of our available revenues, especially in the general fund. And is projected over the next 8 to 10 years to probably swallow up a big part of what we're spending right now on services that we all depend on every day, such as police, fire, Parks and Recreation. And so we've been investigating a hybrid retirement plan, which is what MERS calls it. And we have a representative here tonight to discuss that plan. So if, and her name is Tara Langham. She will be taking it from here.
Thank you. Good evening, everyone. My name is Tara Langham. I'm the Upper Peninsula Regional Manager for MERS. And a couple months ago, I held a special meeting for employers to come and listen to some different options with regards to reducing costs overall with their pension plans. And Darla had attended that meeting and came back and said, I'd like for you to, talk a little bit more about this and to give some information. So all of you, I believe, have the information in your packets. I won't walk through it in its entirety because it would take me a while, but I'll give you a quick overview. So MERS offers 3 different types of pension plans. We have the defined benefit plan, the defined contribution, and the hybrid plan. And essentially, the hybrid plan takes into play both the components of a defined benefit plan and a defined contribution plan. So I'll go back a little bit with the city and the history, and you all know. So you started off in a defined benefit plan. It was decided that the city would move from a defined benefit plan to a defined contribution style plan. And when that happens, you close out your current defined benefit plan and we accelerate the funding on those liabilities. So now all new hires go into defined contribution, but the liability there with the defined benefit employees is still there and needs to be funded quicker. So the situation that the city is in right now, and looking forward and kind of forecasting what the contributions will be into the future is when you close out that defined benefit plan and you move to a defined contribution plan, typically about 10 to 15 years after you make that change, you get to where your peak in contributions is. And depending on where you were when you did the conversion from defined benefit to defined contribution, that peak will be different. So the city is looking now at, okay, are we going to be able to sustain and afford those contributions when our peak hits, which is around 2020, 2022, I think Darla and I had looked at. And some of the different options that MERS has come up with is, our board came up about 2.5 years ago with option B, which is an alternative amortization schedule, which just kind of kicks the liability down the road a little bit, if you will. So it furthers out and it extends out that amortization period a little bit longer so that it provides some contribution relief. Although the city has already adopted that option B alternative amortization, and it's still looking like the contributions may be a little bit too expensive at their peak. So another option is the hybrid plan, and the reason for that is when you go from a defined benefit to a defined contribution plan like the city has done, and then move from a defined contribution to a hybrid plan, because the hybrid plan has a defined benefit component, we are able to reopen for assets and liability purposes that old defined benefit plan. So nobody new is coming into the old defined benefit plan, but because there'll be new hires coming into the defined benefit piece of the hybrid plan, we can use those funds and reopen the amortization schedule.
That one I think you need to go through again.
I will. So
Okay.
let me give you then first, the hybrid plan is built of 2 parts. The hybrid has a defined benefit component where the employer would choose from a 1, a 1.25, or a 1.5% multiplier. So a very modest defined benefit component, okay? It's got a 3-year or 36-month final average compensation period and a 6-year vesting. So it's very modest. It cannot be negotiated once that benefit multiplier is set. You know, it can't be negotiated down the road for, I want a 1.5 if you chose 1. So once it's set, it's designed to be a modest plan.
So if there's labor negotiations after the fact, that can't be changed?
That cannot be changed.
That's where the multiplier kept changing?
Yes.
During labor negotiations?
Right, yeah, absolutely. So that is the defined benefit component of the hybrid. It takes into the same formula as the old defined benefit. You look at your employee's final average compensation, you multiply that by their years of service, by that benefit multiplier that would be set by the city. So that would be the defined benefit component of the hybrid. Everybody following me?
Could there be new hires in defined benefit? I think you said no.
Not into the old closed defined benefit
Into the new
plan.
defined benefit.
Yep,
Okay,
into
okay,
the
okay.
new
All right, I'm-
defined
That's where you
benefit
slid through a
component
little
of the
quick. Okay,
hybrid,
all
yeah.
right.
So remember, hybrid is one plan with 2 components built into it. So defined benefit is one, defined contribution is the other. On the defined contribution side, you can adopt whatever you want as far as a contribution structure. You could say, and this is just an example, the city will put in 3%, you as the employee put in 3%. It works exactly how the defined contribution plan works right now. So the employee then puts in the contributions, the employer puts in their contributions, the employee then chooses the investments, and whatever that balance is at retirement is what then they could use as far as their pension income. So when the employee gets to age 60, as long as they're vested, they'd be eligible then to collect a small, modest defined benefit portion, which would be that lifetime income stream, and the defined contribution piece based on their balance. So it's a 2-part plan. One is a guaranteed income that the employee is going to get every month for the rest of their life. The other is the defined contribution plan where it would be based then on their balance.
So you're talking about adding a third pension plan for the city of Gladstone, in addition to the existing defined benefit, which has been
Yes.
around forever, the
Yep.
defined contribution was started in 1997.
Yep.
A third plan for all new hires, not anybody who's currently working for the city.
Correct, and so let's address that point. So it could be for new hires only, from if this effective date going forward, all new hires go into the hybrid plan, or you could offer conversion for only your defined contribution people. So if you offered conversion to those people that were in the defined contribution plan now, what would happen is, let's say they have a balance in their defined contribution plan of $50,000. They decide, we provide the documentation of what their pension amount would be. They decide to convert into the hybrid plan. Their whole $50,000 would roll into the defined contribution part of the hybrid. And then from that date forward, they would start to earn service time in that defined benefit plan. So if I was an employee here and I've been here since 2000, I'm not going to get service time, going back from my 2000 start date. It would only be for my conversion date of the hybrid start going forward. Because remember, that defined benefit piece is based on those 3 parts.
The only way I could see that this would impact the contribution from the city is if it locked the city into having all new hires into this plan, but without changing that. Because I would think is there something like that built into the agreement? Because it wouldn't make sense if we were to go to this plan and then it decreases our contribution. So the schedule of our payments should change.
It will, yes.
Okay, but if we were to switch back to a defined contribution, that would have to be reevaluated.
Right. So let me just address that. Number one, if you move to the hybrid plan, you cannot go back.
That's what I
to-
thought.
yeah.
That's what I was getting at.
Correct, yeah. The way, and let's start back, so this is just, we're in the very early stages of talks about, we would need to provide some actuarial work to see what effect it would have on your contribution structure. So we would look at the defined benefit component and then the defined contribution component and what that would do to your contributions for the next, 30 years out. What it does do, and I can tell you this just because we've had groups do this, is that it will alleviate that peak when your contributions are at their highest, because you won't be on the accelerated funding, okay? So there's two sides to that. Number
The
one,
important information on that would be how much.
exactly.
Is it worth doing?
Right.
Because for, I think our peak year is 2020,
2021.
2021. $100,000 really wouldn't
Right.
What
affect
you're,
that much.
when you're talking about a peak right now, so we hear this stuff all the time. Public doesn't always hear this. What you're talking about when you talk about peak and accelerated funding and trying to catch up with the assets that are held for a defined benefit are only at about 50% of the future liabilities.
Right.
So when you talk about the accelerated funding that we're going to be facing, if we don't have some growth somewhere, you're only talking about the defined benefit side. You're not talking about the current defined contribution
Correct.
pension.
Correct.
That's fully funded every 2 weeks.
Correct, yep. So, yeah, defined contribution plans have no unfunded liability. And it's important to note that unfunded liability is never a static number. So that unfunded liability number changes every year as you get your annual evaluation. We know, we've talked before about 2008 and the market loss and all of those things and the smooth average and, where you're at. So, I talked with City Manager Falcon earlier and I said, this is one of the things that we'll have to look out for and we'll look at in our calculations when we, if we decide to go down the path of giving that information to you is, how do we think that unfunded liability number will change once 2008 falls off of our smooth average? So we're hoping that once it falls off and the economy continues to do well, that number will go down. But the whole issue is when somebody comes to us and says, we're afraid that that peak is going to make us or break us, whether we're going to be able to pay the required contribution or not. This is an option that's out there so that you then alleviate that big peak in the contribution.
But you, in perpetuity, then you will still have liability.
Yes.
For, that there's no way to, the whole point of a defined contribution is to get away from that
Yes.
annual payment.
You're right.
And, by doing this, it would probably, smooth the peak out. But it also ties the city's hand, or the future commissions, future
Right.
management's hands, and doesn't allow them to, get away from that. Ultimately, we'll continue to have a payment to MERS.
Right. And as I said, there's two sides. So if it's something that you got to a point where you said, we can't afford the contributions, that's an option that's out there to do. But on the other side, with defined contribution, the intent of the accelerated funding is to get you to a point where you're fully paid off that unfunded liability of the defined benefit plan and get down to where you're only on the contribution structure of a defined
Let's back up to
contribution.
2008 again for the public.
Yes.
In 2008, our national economy went into a 49-state recession. Michigan was said to be in a one-state depression because we're so over-reliant on the automobile industry. That's nice information. But the real thing that happened was the assets that were held for pensions went from a value of here down to here just like that overnight, and we still have not recovered from that.
Correct.
And since we have no growth in our tax base, we're trying to get creative about what we're going to do about that. So far, so good. What you've provided to us is why not look into it? There's going to be a cost to look into this, right?
Correct.
Okay.
We talked about that earlier, and it would depend on whether or not you would want to offer conversion to existing defined contribution members or not. The cost would be probably less than $1,000, depending on what you want to do as far as conversion goes. We can do some preliminary calcs in-house that would give you some, quick data, but in order to make an informed decision, I would want you to see a full projection that would give you the next 20, 30 years so you could see where you fall in that 2021,
Well,
peak.
when you talk about those kind of numbers compared to what we're looking at if we do nothing,
Right,
it's pretty much a no-brainer.
yeah, yeah,
Commission agree? Yeah. Because you've all seen the numbers.
yeah.
Well,
Staying on the
Dave
defined
has a question here.
contribution is, I know it's kind of like returning to the gold standard, I guess would be the way, because once you're paid off, you're done.
Yes, you're
And,
right.
and the value of, the value of the US dollar would be
Mm-hmm.
in a completely different place right now. We were still in the gold standard, but essentially that's what we'd be doing, but
Mm-hmm.
looking at the
You were
numbers
absolutely
that are-
right, and we need to come back to that just in case we went a little too fast. When we created the defined contribution in 1997, we said to ourselves, we're going to have tough sledding, 20, 25 years maybe.
Right.
But at some point in time, the defined benefit pension program, which is what we're discussing, the problem we have right now because of that loss in value, will eventually be solved, and then we'll be fully funded with our defined contribution pension going forward. This hybrid was never discussed in 1997 because
Right.
nobody put it up on the table. This
Correct.
is new.
Yes, yeah.
Dave, did you have something?
The hybrid kicks the can down the road a ways, makes the can a little bigger,
Correct.
all right? What happens if we did get a bill for $1 million in 2021 and couldn't pay it?
We will work with you as best that we can. I mean, there's certainly municipalities that are in that position. But eventually, if you don't pay your bills, we would probably turn you over to Treasury, and they, then it would become their problem. That's not what we want to see.
State of Michigan Treasury?
Right, yeah. To see you do. And that's why we're here, just discussing options. And of course, we would not want you to make any decisions, without seeing calculations. So it's
Let me
something
let me
that,
tell you an example of that. I used to work here. I can remember reading probably 15 years ago, Highland Park, which is a suburb of Detroit, which at one time was a very affluent suburb of Detroit and no longer is. Dave's familiar with Highland Park.
yeah,
They were faced at least 15 years ago with, do I pay for police and fire and garbage pickup today, or do I pay for pensions? I can't do both.
right,
That's what you're thinking of.
yeah,
I know.
yeah,
And that's where the asset contemplation comes.
yeah,
That's the whole reason why it was ever discussed.
right.
So, right now, you've got a proposal for the commission to consider tonight to look further into this.
Just to consider it, yes.
I see no reason why we wouldn't want to look into it,
Well,
just to fulfill our obligation to look into all of the.
I agree.
Absolutely. I do definitely
agree.
need to look at what the financial, the cost savings would be, as far as that, those ugly years that we have coming up.
Right. Yeah.
Well, I prefer not to have too many questions from the public, but I'll let one in, otherwise we could digress.
Say you convert to your hybrid plan,
Mhm.
and it's a 6-year vesting.
Mhm.
What happens if the person passes away before he's vested? Is he gonna lose his defined contribution?
No. No. If a member is not vested in a defined contribution plan, the dollars they put in are always theirs. So the employee contributions, if they're not vested in the employer contributions, then they wouldn't get those dollars.
If he was already vested, I'm saying, then he converted.
He'll be vested then, yeah, yep, yeah. So if they're vested right now with, if they offer a conversion, then they would be vested under the new hybrid plan.
Are there different people investing our money now? I mean, the stock market's at all-time highs. What effect has that had on our 51%?
MERS, we have a full range of investments. We manage 15% of our investments in-house in Lansing, and then 85% we use external money managers who we hire.
Right, but
So
I
we
mean,
have a very diverse group that manages our money.
has the increase in market value brought our figure up more than 51%?
There's two sides to that coin. So if you look at our 30-year rate of return, we're at 9.3%. That's great. We're over our 8% assumed rate of return, but we use a 10-year smooth average. So the real market rate of assets is different from your actuarial rate of assets. And so anytime you have a positive number, like 2 years ago, we returned almost 15%, yes, your assets will go up. Years like 2008, we lost 25%. That next year, because we have the smooth average, we didn't come back to say, hey, you got to make up for that 25% loss.
I think there's a different question, and I'm going to allow you to come back and answer this. I keep pointing this out to the commission and to the public when they're listening. The defined contribution, when we created that, it was up to the employee from that point forward to manage their own investments.
Correct.
When we made the contribution every 2 weeks into their pension, we were done as an organization.
Yeah.
The defined benefit, we've transferred that responsibility to invest those assets over to someone else.
Yes.
And while you've had good years since then, you still have not recovered from the fact that this state was so overly reliant on the automobile industry that the assets just plummeted.
Yeah.
And that can't be escaped. You know, we still have not
What
recovered
percent
from
did they
that.
plummet?
In 2008, MERS overall in the total market fund lost 25%.
25%, but you say it's 8% a year after that.
No, we assume on our defined benefit portfolio, because we have assumptions that make up what your contribution structure is. So we assume, our investment team assumes that we're going to hit an 8% rate of return every year. When that assumption isn't met, just like if, you know, we assume that your people are gonna stay and become vested, or we assume that they're gonna retire at age 60. When that assumption isn't met, it's going to change what your contribution is, because defined benefit is based all
I
on
understand, but
assumptions.
you're saying it went down 25%, but on average, you're somewhere around 7, 8, 9%. That would have made up for itself in a matter of 4 or 5 years.
Right.
But it hasn't apparently.
Well, it hasn't yet because we're not out of our 10-year smooth. We take a 10-year smooth average. So 2008 is still built into our 10-year smooth. In 3 years, when that falls off, then your unfunded liabilities and your percent funded, just based on that assumption alone, will start to go up, as long as there's not big impacts to your system.
So the drop was more than 25%.
Has to be.
Has to be.
Well,
Otherwise, none of your numbers make sense.
over a 10-year period of time.
In 2008, they went down more than 25%.
2008, in the total market fund, we lost 24.8%.
That was it.
That was it.
Then everything you say, and then after that, it's gone up.
Every year after that, we've made over we've had positive returns. One year we had 2%, all of our returns are listed. We had
That being the
14.8,
case,
last year
It doesn't
was
make any
7.
sense to me that we're at 51%.
Your percent funding level for your city is based on your assets and liabilities, and it's based on the actuarial assumptions.
The actual area of the people in the defined program.
The defined benefit plan, yes.
Which is a very fluid number.
Dennis has a comment, I think.
Yeah,
What you're saying, Tara, is that your assumption is 8%, but in some
Right.
years it wasn't 8%.
Correct.
It was lower than that. So
Yes.
when you put all those years together, it hasn't made up the 25%.
correct. So right now, our smooth, our assumption is 8%. But right now, our smooth rate is only at 6.3. We need to be at 8. So we're still falling short because we're still making up for the 25% loss.
But since 2008, the market itself is up 4 or 5 times what it was in 2008.
Right.
So to me, none of it makes sense.
Okay,
I can't fathom that the market's gone up so drastically, but the money we have invested is suffering from a 10-year average of some sort. Doesn't make any sense.
let me take over here. Just for the public who maybe is getting really confused now, going like, oh.
Yeah.
In February, I think it was in February, we had our annual budget hearings. We have to adopt a budget by March 31st. We were presented, the city operates a number of different funds. The big one that we have a problem with is our general fund, because that's supported by tax dollars from new construction. We were presented the budget document, and in the budget document, the city manager outlined through 2031 the annual requirements for the defined benefit pension provided by MERS. You've seen that number, I'm sure.
Yeah, Darla
That is a
showed that
big
to me.
number that we can't swallow at this point in time. We would not be able to do it. That's just a fact. And so I would encourage everybody to get a copy of that. Stop by tomorrow, ask staff for a copy of that, and you'll see the kind of numbers that we're looking at as we try and get our arms around this. And again, I see no reason why we wouldn't want to look into the hybrid plan to see if we can smooth that out, because we can't make these projections. We can't grow that fast. We're not growing at all right now, in fact.
Right.
I just have 2 comments if I can add.
City manager?
So in 2008, we were not 100% funded. So that's kind of part of what Tara's talking about, the difference in assets and liabilities.
We talked about that last meeting, because you and I used to work together, and I think we were at 75 to 80%. I don't think
Yeah.
we were nowhere near 100.
No.
Now, I think it's unrealistic. I'm not trying to take shots at you because
No.
you happen to be here at a meeting tonight, because that's
Right.
not fair. But I think it's unrealistic to expect that we would get to 100%, but that's really what what's being requested of us right now, and that's, we can't do that.
I know.
Do you know, this is probably an unfair question to you, but a couple years ago, Treasury was trying to put some requirements out for municipalities to bond for this unfunded liability, and the requirements were pretty high. You had to be AA rated, certain things. I had called a bonding agency downstate and said, do you think the city of Gladstone would qualify to bond for this? And he said, no, the only community in the UP that had a AA bond rating would be City of Marquette. Do you know if that has changed? Would we qualify to bond for?
You would have to look to a bond consultant
Okay,
again.
okay.
We have information that we could provide you. I've only had one group look into it and decided not to do it. They weren't qualified.
Okay.
We've got several in the Lower Peninsula, and they extended out the bonding time. So we can certainly work together to look into that if it's something that you want to move forward with. But yeah, the requirements are still there.
Okay.
Yeah.
So unless there's any other questions from the commission, I think we should move forward,
Okay.
and we don't need any action tonight.
No.
I mean, yeah, I guess you'd have to define move forward. I mean,
Yeah.
I think our next step is to get a set of numbers as far as what
Yeah.
we'd be looking at if we did adopt this, and that's gonna include a lot of factors like who we anticipate retiring, who's gonna be replacing them, which would be in this plan, which is
Yeah.
gonna add contributions, et cetera, et cetera. So it's kind of a complicated, calculation, but I think that would be the thing we would need next.
This is a commissioner who one night said something to me, he says, well, you know, I looked at our books, and if we liquidated, I think we could cover all of what we owe, right?
That's about it. Yeah.
That's what you're thinking, right?
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah, we'll
we're not
definitely
looking to
look at
liquidate,
that.
but,
No, no.
very good.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Sorry if you got beat up a little bit there. Okay, moving on, the next item on our agenda is something that has been sitting around for some time in this organization for a number of years. We really should create a new MERS division. That's our retirement plan again for command officers in the Public Safety Department. So I turn it over to the city manager for more discussion.
Yeah, I talked with MERS recently, and right now we have two unions in public safety. The public safety officers, and then the command officer has his own union contract, negotiated separately. They are not mirror, copies of each other. There are different things in each contract. Talking with MERS, they kind of said, why wasn't this done when it was originally, separated, when they had their separate contracts? I can't answer that. Even if it's one person is represented by its own union contract, they really need to have their own division at MERS. To create the fourth division at MERS, there's no fee for that, but to transfer the assets for that employee to that correct division, there is a $400 fee for that supplemental valuation. So that's what I'm requesting tonight.
Is that all we're looking at, is the $400 fee?
$400 fee.
There's
Yep, that's it.
there's no issues with the existing division, MERS division? It's contrary to the command officer's contract, so we're good?
No.
Just the $400 is all you're looking for?
$400. Yep.
A little additional information, by the way. When I worked here, there were 4 officers in that classification. There were 2 night sergeants, the day lieutenant, and the detective sergeant. We have not filled positions because we've cut back the public safety department. So now there's only 1 person in that division. There used to be 4.
I'd move approval.
I'll second.
Moved by Commissioner Gay, supported by Commissioner Mattinen, to add new MERS division for command officer. Any further discussion? All those in favor of that motion, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, that motion's carried. Tonight, we're introducing the appropriations ordinance number 596 and setting a public hearing. Every year after we do finally get our budget adopted, we have to have an ordinance to, this is just for the general fund, and it basically says, for the general fund, not for the water fund, wastewater fund, major street fund, local street fund, electric fund, or any of those other funds, just the general fund, how much we intend to levy in the way of property taxes and big, broad, general areas where we plan on spending that money. So tonight, we'd be setting the public hearing.
Move we set the public hearing for April 27th, 2015 for public input on ordinance number 596.
Support.
Moved by Commissioner Mattinen, supported by Commissioner Nemechek to set a public hearing to introduce Appropriations ordinance number 596. All those in favor of that motion signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, that motion is carried. Next item on our agenda, the city manager is going to lead the conversation on this. She's asking for authorization to purchase a new server that's it's a dedicated computer that talks to all the other computers that are used every day by all of our staff here in City Hall, and citywide phone system, which I believe we talked about at budget time and agreed to put into the budget, so this is just putting it in action to go out and get bids, correct?
Correct. The data server we've had on our capital outlay list for the last couple years. And if you remember our conversation not too long ago with the assessor, she's kind of locked into adding new information to the server because our server's full. Talked with our IT person on that. A new server would take care of all of the data amongst everybody else at City Hall, including the new information from the assessor. So I don't really see an option. We really can't hold off on this anymore. That's kind of a must at the top of the list. The citywide phone system, we have been having problems with our phones here at City Hall for quite some time.
I believe that's the phone system that was in operation when I was here.
Yes.
So it's probably 12, 15 years old.
20?
20 years old.
20 or
It's a
more.
hand crank system.
So we have a base in the basement that serves City Hall phones and the electric department. We're on the same system. And then public safety down at their building, they have their own system as well. And then each department, water plant, wastewater plant, Parks and Recreation, they all have just their own phone system within their building. So we met with Solutions Telecommunications, the company that sets up our phone system here. We are really out of options. There's nothing else they can do to our system. So this is the configuration that they put together. Most of our departments right now are connected through a VPN, a virtual network. Several of our departments dial into a computer here at City Hall and enter payroll timesheets. So that connection's already made. They're recommending that we have one base here at City Hall to serve everybody, including City Hall, except Public Safety. And then Public Safety Department would have their own base set there to service their phone system for reliability purposes. If we go down here at City Hall, the Police Department could still very well have their phone system, vice versa. Hopefully, Public Safety never goes down, but it could. But instead of the traditional landlines that we use to make phone calls, this configuration actually uses the internet to make phone calls. So this is where technology is headed.
There's a nice picture you should all take a look at after the meeting.
Yeah.
If you like pictures.
So I know the price on this is quite steep, and we've added some additional information in the packet here. If we used the Dr. Mary Cretin's money under improvements to the city, we have $35,444 available in that line item from Dr. Mary Cretin's endowment. And then we could just divide up the rest of the cost to all the departments, and we would be able to cover that with the current year's budget, because including the savings, if we did this right away, like they said about 30 days it would take for the full setup, the savings just in this fiscal year would pay this portion back that we divided up to the departments. So,
I move approval.
Support. Moved by Commissioner Nemchek, supported by Commissioner Gay, to approve the authorization to purchase a server and citywide phone system. Any further discussion? All those in favor of that motion signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, that motion's carried. Next item on our agenda, our Public Safety Director Paul Guyer is going to talk to us about a patrol vehicle purchase.
Good evening, Commissioners. Paul Guyer from Public Safety. You have an agenda item before you tonight for approval, hopefully to purchase a new Ford Interceptor utility. This would replace our current Car 60, which is a Ford 2010 Ford CVPI at Crown Vic Patrol Interceptor. This is a planned budget purchase this year. This is the deal the supporting documentation that you have is the My Deal quote from Gorno Ford, which we are a My Deal participant.
My Deal is the state of Michigan buying patrol cars for anybody who wants to participate, right?
Correct. We have routinely purchased through the My Deal. We've made purchases from Gorno Ford in the past, including our last vehicle, which was a Ford Interceptor utility. So you have in front of you the specs on the car. And again, I'm seeking your approval to go ahead with this purchase. The quote from Gorno Ford is for $30,717. This would be the cost from Gorno Ford, and then we would obviously have upfitting costs to get our equipment put into the vehicle.
Again, going back to our budget talks earlier this year, this was in your budget when you presented a budget to the city commission.
Correct.
So do we have a motion?
I move approval.
I'll second.
Moved by Commissioner Gay, supported by Commissioner Mattinen. Do we have any further discussion? This is another SUV type vehicle, correct?
This is another utility,
High-profile
correct?
vehicle?
No EcoBoost though, I see.
Not for that price, no.
Yeah.
I mean, and there have been, just, that's an option that I didn't think we needed.
All right, all those in favor of that motion signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye, those opposed, that motion's carried. Now, our liability and property insurance carrier has grants available for a number of different areas for municipal government, one of them being Paul's department, so he's asking to make a RAP grant application for a prisoner partition for this new vehicle.
Correct.
And a RAP grant application for a bumper guard for this new vehicle.
Correct. Both those applications that you have before you are pretty standard. I did notice, however, today when I rechecked the standard grant application through MMRMA that they used to have the prisoner partitions listed on there. They didn't on this most recent list, but it doesn't matter. We can still apply for it. Doesn't matter that it's on their standard list. So I'm seeking approval to apply for these two RAP grants. It doesn't pay for the entire cost, but it pays a portion of the cost for our upfitting of the vehicles.
I'm assuming a liability and property carrier, which covers almost all the cities in Michigan, wants patrol cars to have that partition. Because probably some departments might go without it, which is not. a
Yeah,
good idea.
some departments do not go without a prisoner partition, which I think is a safety concern.
I would
However,
say.
we've always had them. We have not always had the bumper guards on the front of the vehicles. However, those have proven themselves in saving us some costs in minor car deer collisions or things like that, so.
And both the other two amounts are budgeted as well?
Well, they're figured in our costs for upfitting the vehicle.
Okay. I'd move that we approve the application for the RAP grant, both applications for the prisoner partition and for the bumper guard.
Support.
Moved by Commissioner Gay, supported by Commissioner Nemechek to approve the MIRMA RAP grant applications for the prisoner participation and for the bumper guard for the new patrol vehicle. Any further discussion? All those in favor of that motion, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, that motion's carried.
Thank you.
Thank you, Paul. Tom Dukowski and Linda Wickland are members of the DDA who are asking to be reappointed. Staff is recommending we reappoint Tom and Linda to the DDA boards.
I move approval.
Support. Moved by Commissioner Nemechek, supported by Commissioner Boster to reappoint Tom Dukowski and Linda Wickland to the DDA. All those in favor of that motion signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, that motion's carried. Same thing with our Economic Development Corporation. Steve Delaire and Don St. Germain are asking to be reappointed for another 6-year term.
Move approval.
I'll second.
Commissioner Gay moved, supported by Commissioner Mattinen to reappoint EDC members, Mr. Steve Delaire and Mr. Don St. Germain. All those in favor of that motion signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, that motion's carried. We have a statewide election. Also, there is a city ballot question on May 5th. The city clerk needs authorization to appoint election workers to work that election. Anything you wanted to add to that, Kim?
We have 2 precinct precinct 1 and 2, City Hall, and the Gladstone Sports Park. We also utilize an absentee voter counting board, and they are the ones that process the absentee ballots that are out right now. And then there's also a receiving board where each precinct brings all their information at the end of the night, and they double check it and stuff. So I have to have workers for all of those. If people are interested, I'm always looking for new workers or additional workers, so a little plug for that. But otherwise, I need authorization, please.
I'd move to authorize city clerk to appoint the necessary election workers and alternates for the May 5th, 2015 election.
Support.
Moved by Commissioner Mattson, supported by Commissioner Nemetchik, to authorize city clerk to appoint election workers for the May 5th election. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Those opposed, that motion is carried. And the additional item on our agenda tonight is the statewide ballot proposal, which is meant to address the poor condition of roads and bridges in Michigan. It's a proposal from the state legislature and Governor Schneider. Commissioner Mattman was just down at the Capitol Conference down in Lansing and came back with information on that. And our statewide League of Cities, the Michigan Municipal League, is asking cities to consider passing resolutions in support of this statewide ballot proposal. So with that, I turn it over to Commissioner Mattman if there's anything further you'd like to add.
Mr. Mayor, I'd like to have this read, and if we could first, before we take action on this.
You want me to read it?
Please.
You're welcome. A resolution in support of Proposal 1 for safer roads. Whereas Michigan's roads and bridges threaten driver safety and contribute to countless accidents each year as drivers swerve to avoid potholes and other road hazards. And whereas 38% of Michigan's state and locally owned urban roads and 32% of the state's state and locally owned rural roads are in poor condition. And whereas Michigan has relied on Band-Aid short-term fixes for our roads instead of investing enough money to fix our roads for the long term, and whereas Michigan invests less per capita in transportation than any state in the United States of America, and whereas the longer we wait to fix Michigan's roads, the more it will cost us, and whereas in addition to threatening public safety, Michigan's crumbling roads hurt our economy, and whereas Proposal 1 on the May 5th ballot is Michigan's last best chance to finally fix our roads with funds that the politicians can't divert somewhere else, while also supporting Michigan's long-term future by investing in our public schools and local communities. And whereas having adequate resources to fix our crumbling roads and bridges is crucial to helping improve the state's economy and just generate an estimated 15,000 new skilled and high-paying jobs in Michigan. And whereas because safe roads are central to the movement of goods throughout Michigan, Proposal 1 is supported by some of Michigan's leading organizations of job providers, including the Grand Rapids Area Chamber of Commerce, the Southwest Michigan First, Business Leaders for Michigan, the West Michigan Policy Forum, Detroit Regional Chamber, Small Business Association of Michigan, Greater Brighton Area Chamber of Commerce, Michigan Lodging and Resort Association, and more. And whereas having safe roads is vital to the success of municipalities and is supported by some of the state's leading associations, including the Michigan Municipal League, that's our representative in Lansing, Michigan Association of Counties, the Grand Valley Metropolitan Council, and Michigan Township Association. And now therefore be it resolved that the City of Gladstone supports Proposal 1 on the May 5 ballot to provide the funding needed to finally fix our roads for the long term, and resolved that the City of Gladstone knows the 1 cent increase in the sales tax will benefit local communities and help ensure drivers' safety on the roads, and resolved that the City of Gladstone formally supports safe roads, yes, because if it passes, every penny we pay at the pump in state gas taxes is guaranteed in the Constitution to go to transportation. That is a resolution we're being asked to support tonight mainly by our representatives in the Michigan Municipal League, which we pay to represent us like all cities in Michigan do. And like I said, Commissioner Mattman just came back from the Capitol Conference, so you're probably the most versed on this subject.
Well, I don't know if I'm the most versed, but I am
Well, you are
convinced.
tonight.
I am convinced this is something that we need to take care of because we have roads in our state that aren't getting the maintenance and repair they need, and that it's also a safety issue for all of our residents, and then it's also an economic issue for the state. I think if this proposal passes, it'll have as much or more impact on our economy has in a positive way than many things have for a number of years. So I'm in favor of this. I think it's not a perfect proposal, but it's certainly by far the best that I've seen in 31 years of them looking at this problem. So I would make the motion that we adopt this resolution and pass it on.
I support. Moved by Commissioner Matten, supported by Commissioner Bostrick to adopt the resolution as suggested for statewide ballot proposal 1. Is there any further discussion from the commission?
I was, with face value knowledge I had prior to Commissioner Madden explaining thoroughly last meeting, I was opposed to this, but after further research, I'm in agreement, and it's a very, very good idea. It's just very complex.
What a surprise.
Mhm.
Any further discussion from the commission? All right, I'm going to call a question. All those in favor of that motion, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, that motion is carried. We're moving on to the city manager's reports.
At the last commission meeting, I mentioned this morning, our utility committee would be meeting to review delinquent accounts from the winter. The city of Gladstone could not turn off resident accounts since last November 1st through April 15th. So we printed the reports. We are looking at, this is not an easy task, believe me. The report started at delinquent amount of $240,518.
I believe you've told me that it's not any more than historically.
It was pretty close to last year. This total is,
It's an every
Yeah.
year kind of thing. When you go through winter, people
Right.
kind of fall behind on their bills, and then they try and catch up.
some accounts haven't paid anything all winter. That's,
Not good.
so we are looking at, we went through the list today, and there are 439 accounts on the list, on the delinquent past due list. We are looking at putting out some door knockers next Monday, April 20th. If nothing is paid on that past due amount, we will be doing shut-offs on April 23rd. And since there are so many accounts on the list, we're gonna have to, we're hoping to do more door knockers by the 27th or the 23rd or 24th for a shut-off the following Monday. We're just gonna have to tackle it in stages. So, again, this is not an easy task. We do not want to turn people's power off, but when they haven't made any payments all winter, they have to seek assistance at this time, and assistance is available through, just call 211 and they'll give you the list of agencies that have money right now. DHS, however, though the rules have changed, and they will only have money through May 30th to help with delinquent accounts, so now's the time to ask for assistance. In your packet tonight, under information, there was an insert from WPPI. Real good communication, just letting the city and residents know the assistance that we're able to take advantage of, through WPPI. Some real good information in here. It's on our website. Take a look at that if you have a minute. The compost vouchers are in now, so there will be a letter going out in the utility bills here in the next day or two, explaining all residents that want to use the compost site need to come to the city, even city residents, and then the township residents that are coming in, we already sent them a letter in their notice of assessment, so those vouchers are now ready and available at the front window. I have a committee working on an ORV ordinance, and I'm not sure if I've mentioned that before. This is something that has been on our list for a while. We currently do not have an ORV ordinance. ORVs are not allowed in the city right now, but we are working on that, hoping we got to go through Parks and Recreation. Some of those board members are on our committee, hoping to bring that to the city commission in May. So if you have any questions on that or want information, just give me a call. I can let you know where we're at so far.
Just to clarify, the reason for that is so that we actually, we permit some operation.
Right.
Paul's probably better to speak
Yeah.
on this than I am, but I know there's some that's tolerated based on the type of year and the location.
Right.
And this ordinance would, I'm assuming you're doing this to clarify that, so it's actually.
Yes. Yep.
Okay.
They will be permitted in certain areas.
Okay.
Yep. Tomorrow afternoon, I will be attending my final Northern Initiatives board meeting. I have decided to not renew my seat on that board, so just really need to focus on city activities right now. And I talked to Dennis West, he's the president there, and he fully understands and will, they still access our revolving loan fund, and I'll still be working with them, you know, somehow to work with that money, but I won't be a Northern Initiatives board member. And we got a letter from MEDC regarding our RLF money, that Northern Initiatives has not done a loan yet since we turned it over to them, and this is nothing new. Every 2 years, they come and say, if you're not using the money, we're gonna take it back. They threatened that many years that we had the money in our
We turn
in
the
our
money over to
control.
Northern Economic Initiatives, all right?
Right.
So it's their problem now, right?
Well, we're
It's
still the
held on our
community.
behalf, but-
Right, yeah. That, they're administering it, it's still the community's money, so we are working with a few businesses on some loans, so hopefully that won't be the situation, but
Could the head of our EDC take your position on the board? So we would have some representation there in case, just to keep up to date?
yeah, I can ask Dennis who, you know, what credentials they're looking at in a board member.
Okay.
Yeah.
The head of our EDC is a personal friend of Dennis West. I mean, they know each other well.
Steve Techman?
No, I'm talking about Don. Oh,
Oh.
I thought you were referring to Don.
No,
You're referring to
whoever
Steve.
the head of the EDC is my.
It is Steve, you're right.
Steve Techman is the
Steve
chair.
Techman, yeah, or Don St. Germain if he wanted to be too. I mean, I think it's important to have somebody there.
The board meetings are quarterly.
Mm-hmm, yeah, it's not bad.
And don't forget, next Monday night, WPPI rate study meeting, we'll put some kind of literature out. I don't have anything to give you yet. I will see if something's going to be available
Is that
before,
here
but
5 to 7?
right here at 5 to 7,
Right.
next Monday night.
Right.
That's all I have.
All right, moving on to city commission and committee reports and boards and commission reports. Anything on those that any commissioners especially would like to bring up if you've attended any meetings? 5 PM, the WPPA starts. Okay, I got that on my calendar. All right. Nothing? All right, we're gonna go back to public comment again. If you would take the podium, if there's any public comment. Mr. Levine.
My name is Ken Levine. I live at 2722 South Hill Road, Gladstone, Michigan. Darla, I was rough on you last week, and I apologize for that. Number 2, was you the one, when I came up here on the gate, I found the gate where they were going in the back, had a lock put on there? Because I
No.
couldn't find,
Mark did.
you know,
Mr.
Mark.
Palega did, she says.
Yeah.
Mr. Palega did.
Yeah. Oh, okay. Okay, the compost pile, the boulders are up. Friday, 2 city employees worked in there cleaning, one putting the boulders, the other cleaning. But the main problem we're still having, I was there Saturday and Sunday. They're taking their stuff in there and they're not even emptying the bags. Another one, got a big pile of actual garbage that came in Sunday evening because after I left.
So it's not compost.
It's garbage.
Yeah.
If you go there and look, they had it covered with the brush, you know, all that. And no wonder we got rats down there. If there's food for them, there'll be rats. One other remark that I was a little bit upset at the last meeting. Somebody said that people's wells were going dry and other things. Well, I've been back 20 years, and I only know of one guy, not a well went dry, but his septic system. Do you know of anybody's well went dry or anything like that?
I don't.
I don't think you do, because I haven't heard of any. I got relatives all over this place, and I got kids, guys I went to school and girls I went to school with. Another thing that I'm a little bit upset about, well, not actually upset because I don't blame them. If you go look at the realtors, and they're selling property, whether it be in Escanaba Township, Brampton Township, Brampton Township taxes low. Well, naturally, they're lower. And you got people here that work in Gladstone, and in fact, employees here that work in Gladstone, but they live outside of Gladstone. I don't blame them for that. They're saving a lot of money. When I pay my utility bills, I got more money it costs me for wastewater than it does for electricity. If you add that up over a year, it's a lot of money. That'll pay for a pump on a well, I'm sure. My brother-in-law lives over there since he retired. He's never had any problems with his pumps. I know 3 people in fact, relatives in Escanaba Township, they never had any trouble with their wells and that. So why are we talking about townships? This is Gladstone, people. You're on the board, all on the board. You're supposed to be talking about Gladstone. These are Gladstone people sitting here. I'm a Gladstone resident. We don't want to hear about some other town, of how much their taxes are. That's none of our business, actually. And I got a little upset about that. So anyway, that's all I got to say.
Thank you, Mr. Levine. I had dinner at the 4J's, and Mr. Levine stopped and talked to me, and I saw that document, and that's where the new homes are being built. They're not being built in our community, and if we want to retain full services compared to our neighbors, which don't offer full services, we've got to do a better job of marketing and perhaps open up some properties for development. Otherwise, we know that the projections going out in future years are going to be impossible to meet. So we'll be talking about cutting services. So we need to have a planned approach to what we're going to do to address our future financial picture. So just added that to Mr. Levine's. Okay, any other public comments? Okay, none. Okay, we're moving to city commissioner comments. I'm going to start at this end of the table and start with Commissioner Mattman tonight.
I'm all set, thank you.
Commissioner Gay.
I've got a couple things. First, I'm going to be absent for the next commission meeting. I will be on my way back from Florida. Yeah, I know.
Aw.
I've got a couple things here. You know, I was listening to the public comment at the beginning of the meeting, and I'm happy to have people come and comment. And you know, the whole point of this is for us to share our ideas and figure out the best way to move forward as a city, you know, fellow residents. And that's definitely what's needed. What I find kind of interesting is that we're in the very preliminary stages of looking and identifying properties that potentially could be offered for sale. And I'm under no illusion that this is going to be easy. But none of the decisions based, you know, that we're going to have to look at for the future as far as finances for the city, none of them are going to be easy. The reality is actually pretty scary. You know, we've invested a lot of time into identifying these locations, and you know, there was a comment made about, I believe it was your daughter, sir, that, you know, she really enjoys being here. I've got friends that are the same way. Boy, this is great. My question is, well, why aren't people building houses here? We've got piles and piles of lots up on the bluff. You know, obviously we don't have the industry. We don't, you know, to support a lot of people coming in, and we need to work on that. We're going to be very shortly in a situation that the city services are going to be impacted. The ability to pay for the city services are going to be impacted. If you like the services you have now, we need to. It's one or the other. Either they have to be paid for one way or the other. We heard the report on the MERS. We're looking at ways to decrease our liability, decrease the extreme liability in the next 10 years on that, at least smooth it out, to better sustain those services. But, you know, we're at a preliminary point of even identifying properties. There's other properties that have been mentioned. But we established a committee, I believe, a month and a half ago, and I think we've met and we've presented our preliminary findings to the public at public meetings, and we still are waiting, I believe, on title work on 3 of the properties of the 5 that we initially identified. So this is very early in this process. But one thing I have to one thing I wanted to highlight is if we do nothing and just hope things get better, that's not an answer. That's not a viable answer. It's not a viable option. We have to objectively look at the assets that we have, determine which is going to best fit the city itself. One thing that I wanted to state, it was mentioned that, there was concern over the waterfront, access to the waterfront for city residents. We've continued to maintain that whatever property was made available for sale or development, whatever, would exclude that waterfront portion, so that waterfront portion was still accessible to the public. That's been specifically and consistently stated throughout this process that's only started a month and a half ago. So there's a lot of things that we need to look at, but we can't just do nothing and hope it gets better, because I guarantee you it will not. The financial situation, if on the surface it may look okay, but if you look deeply into it, it's dire. So we need to be proactive and not reactive. Reactive would be expending our general fund balance and hope that the state gives us more money next year. I call that delusional, because it's not going to happen. Being proactive is putting a plan into place to make sure that we can meet all of our commitments, primarily the retirement system payments, and maintain services. And frankly, unless there was some sort of significant influx of tax revenue, which either would come from Santa Claus in Lansing, which that's not going to happen, or an increase in taxes, or an increase in taxable base. One of those three things has to happen in order to increase revenue to maintain the services that we have and meet our future commitments. So this will be very public and very thoroughly discussed and vetted before a decision is made. At least that was my intent. But just be aware that we are doing our homework, and we're just starting to do our homework. This is going to be a relatively lengthy process. So that's all I have.
Commissioner Bostrick? Nothing. Commissioner Nemechek?
I recall when we were talking about Proposal 1 that there was, as part of that, possibly more money to the city.
Yeah.
And that there was an estimate of something in the neighborhood of 300,000 or 200,000?
On the revenue sharing side of it, 47,000 per year, and after the first 2 years into the program, in the third year, we would be receiving over 300,000 in street monies.
In street lights?
Yeah.
Okay. Well, that's significant.
It is significant.
Yeah, something that we should be
'Cause that can be-
aware of when we vote yes on Proposal 1.
Correct.
Because it wasn't mentioned in any of the whereases.
Correct.
Well, one of the things that we've stated here, you're probably better to talk about this than I am, but we don't, realistically, the dollars that we get for road funding isn't enough to maintain what we have, let alone rebuild or reconstruct anything.
No, I understand. But it's just that Proposal 1 provided more money, that's all. And I wanted to be sure we talked about that. The other thing I wanted to say is that I, like the gentleman that spoke earlier, talked about his daughter coming here and telling us, I just drove for the 51st time to and from Florida, and I always try to go a different way. I try to get off the expressway and go the back roads as much as I can, and yeah, we're lucky to be here. This acreage, this parcel we have out into the Great Lakes, and have the bluff besides, is special, no question.
So why are you trying to take it away then?
I'm not trying to take it away.
Please, no public debate,
No
please.
comment?
Okay.
Well, I would like to say one thing. You're all talking in a normal voice, and I cannot, it's like you're just sitting and having a conversation. Is anybody else? Do you hear them?
I can't hear them.
No, you can't hear them. No.
I hear real good. It's too low.
You're not.
Like speakers there, please use them.
They're right in front of us.
I can hear you.
This isn't for
and
inside.
And backing and talking. These three guys, I can't.
These aren't amplifiers, though. These are for the cable.
This is to get out into TV land.
This is for the cable. It's not a
For the
PA,
public,
it's not a PA system, though.
for us peasants.
Well, I try to speak loudly.
Okay.
You're one of the best.
Okay,
Oh,
so
thank you, Dave.
You have a loud voice.
I do, I know.
Yeah, you've heard that before.
okay.
That's all.
Now, tomorrow morning's the DDA meeting. I always invite people to go to the DDA meetings. The DDA meetings I know might be something you wouldn't feel comfortable being at, but you really ought to go down to those meetings if you want to see more of what's going on. The DDA is what the city has established to work on downtown businesses. That's their job. We work with them, but that's their job. And so there's a DDA meeting tomorrow morning at 8 o'clock. Down in the new building right in 900 block of Delta Avenue.
Oh, their new building?
Special events building, yes.
Yeah.
So I'd love to see some of you guys there
That's
tomorrow
interesting.
morning. Commissioners all saw a complaint that public safety handled. There's an event that takes place downtown. I don't want to get into particulars, but I just wanted to make sure the public safety got a little bit of credit for getting right on top of that matter. I received something on our email server right away, and I called Public Safety Department. The director was otherwise occupied. One of the officers took my call, and he was already doing background looks into the complaints, and I thought that was pretty fast. And this officer happens to be pretty sophisticated at looking into electronic communications and figuring out where electronic communications are coming from. So I salute them for that. As far as the land development issue, if there was something to be talked about tonight, we would be talking about it. Every one of you feel free to call me. Please feel free to call me. I'd love to sit down with you and show you what I'm looking at. But at some point in time, we as a community are going to be discussing at the commission level. You could have an entirely different commission by then, who knows? What we're going to do to address our financial condition, because part of what I will discuss with you, if you do take the time to contact me, is what we're looking at financially and what I think we can do as a community to make this an even better community than we live in right now. I would reiterate what Commissioner Gay said. I will never support a plan that excludes the public from getting to the waterfront on properties that they can get to the waterfront on now. I won't support that. I don't believe any of the current commissioners would support that either. So that's one of the things that has to happen in any proposed development that I would discuss as a commissioner. But I'd love for you to get a hold of me and show you what we've talked about so far. It's not ready for public consumption yet. Otherwise, it would be on the commission agenda. And I would caution any commission to go slowly on this, not fast, because once you make that decision, you can't reverse yourself, as this gentleman said. And I think that was everything I wanted to talk about tonight, other than, again, I'd love to see you guys come out for a DDA meeting tomorrow. They're the ones that brought Gus Macker to Gladstone. They're the ones that do a lot of the promotions, the commercial promotions in the downtown area. And so, if they're...
Mr. Mayor?
Commissioner Nemechek.
I think we should put together something that we should send to all the realtors. A compilation of, living in the country and living in the city is kind of like traveling in a motorhome and traveling at in the Hampton Inns. It's a different lifestyle. When you want to live out in the township, it's usually because you maybe want to keep animals, or you want to have more acreage, or you don't want to have neighbors, and there's all kinds of reasons. But it's not necessarily less expensive, and I think we should take a few minutes sometime and put together something on paper where we show that people in the country pay higher insurance rates, they have more commuting costs, they don't get as many services, they don't have 24-hour police protection, they don't have a lot of things we have in the city, and a lot of it costs money. And I don't think it is cheaper to live in townships.
I think we've done the calculation.
Well, I think we're remiss in
you're
not
right.
putting something together and sending it out to all the real estate people so that they can stop putting this
I agree.
this
and
stuff in the ads.
I agree, and I disagree with some of the things you say. I agree that we need to do I've said it many times, we need to do a better job of marketing the fact that a city is a much higher level of service, and it's more expensive to live in a city. And
Maybe it isn't.
And because it is, we need to market the fact that while it costs more, you get far superior service, in my estimation. That's just my opinion. Other people may have a different opinion. On the other hand, however, we've got to do something about the fact that we're not getting any growth. We can't count on any new property tax revenues, and we need to get more property tax revenues, because even if we're the best managers in the whole wide world, we can't keep certain expenses from increasing. Even if we're the best in the world, there are some expenses that'll increase, so we need new revenues as well.
But you admitted in your statement that it's cheaper to live in the township, and I don't think it always is. I think if you put a pencil to the whole process.
Perception.
Of all your, it's a perception, but I don't think it's right.
You could be right. And so that's what the city commission has to wrestle with, because, like I said, even the best of managers, even if you pinch every penny, there are expenses that increase, and if you don't have increasing revenues, you're going to have a graph that meets itself, and you're going to have a huge problem, and that's what we're looking at going forward. So we need to get very creative about how we're going to preserve things like pensions. When you start talking about people's benefits and their jobs, that gets pretty hairy, and it's not a fun conversation. But we'll be going forward, and there's one more other item on the agenda. I hadn't forgot about you either. I was just going to get to you. The city clerk comments.
I have been busy preparing for the election. Absentee ballots are available now for anybody who's not going to be able to make it to on election day to the polls. You can come down to my office and I can get you that and take care of that. One thing that I want to comment too, there's been some information out there, or some confusion regarding the local recall election in the city of Gladstone. People are expecting it to be a yes or no question. It is not. That is based on election law. I don't get to say how the ballot is put together and what's on it and what's not. Ballots are produced by election law standards. So what you see is the result of some recent election law changes. It is a recall election, however, it is not a yes or no ballot, so I'd encourage you to get a copy of a sample ballot to look at before you go to the polls, so you completely understand your ballot. If you have questions, you can call my office. I'd be happy to explain it, but the ballot itself is, you want to vote for who you want to see seated in those positions. So you want to vote for who you want in there, which is different than past recall election law in previous years. So it does look a little bit different, so I'd encourage you just to take a look at a sample ballot before you go to the polls, or if you need an absentee ballot, those are available.
So tomorrow you can get up and you can call Eric about the water issue, you can call Kim about the elections issue, and you can probably call Paul about something if you want. And
Yes, so I'm available. I'd rather you ask the question, so that you're clear on your ballot. And if you already have your ballot and you've made a mistake on that, please contact me. We can get you a new ballot, so that you can get it voted the way you want it. So that's all I have.
thank you very much, Kim. That being nothing further, we'll stand adjourned for the night. Thank you for coming out. It's 8:45. We stand adjourned.